All righty. There might be a few other people joining us, but why don't we go ahead and get started? Hi, I'd like to welcome everyone. I'm Steve Procopio. I'm the president of the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana. PAR is a nonprofit, non-partisan watchdog and policy research group. We've been starting having these webinars a couple of months ago to try and just discuss topics in a civil way that people are interested in. We have, I don't know if you noticed on the placard, we now have a sponsor, ExxonMobil, and I definitely want to thank them for their support. We're talking about the Louisiana's teachers shortage. So to do that, I've gathered I think a great panel. We have Dr. Cade Brumley, who is the superintendent of education in Louisiana. He started in 2020, which was good timing in terms of having to deal with education problems right before the COVID issues. He also was the superintendent of Jefferson Schools, the largest school district in the state, and also DeSoto Parish, which is not the smallest, but it's much smaller than Jefferson Parish. It's a good variety. Also, we have Dr. Paula Calderon, who's the dean of the highly respected education college at Southeastern University. And apparently we were talking beforehand. We actually worked on the project together back when I was at LSU. And also found out you are the president of the Louisiana Association of Colleges for Teacher Education. And so you'll be finishing up your 2-year term later this summer. Is that right? So that's fantastic. We also have Cynthia Posey, who is the legislative and political director at the Louisiana Federation of Teachers and School Employees. Louisiana Federation of Teachers, y'all started in Louisiana. I think you've got a charter from AFT in 1965 is what I found. And actually, it goes back in the New Orleans chapter to 1932. So definitely been a presence in Louisiana for a long time. And then Cynthia and I also serve on the MFP task force. So, so really this is, I want to thank all of y'all. We hold these at 12:15 so that people have 15 minutes to kind of get ready for lunch. However, I know there's a lot of people that can't join in, particularly educators who might be interested because they're actually teaching right now. And so that's why we record these and we'll put them on our YouTube channel and send it out for everyone to look at later. So with that, I'm gonna start out with a few questions and then we have Melinda DeLotte who will follow up. She's our research director and she will be grilling y'all for the rest of the time. She will also relay some of the questions that we're getting in our chat or question and answer. So if anyone on the participants has a question, at any time, just put your questions in there and we'll get to them when we can. Usually if there's multiple questions, the same thing, Melinda sort of groups them together. All right, with that, let me start. Let's try and define what the teacher shortage crisis is in Louisiana. And depending on how we answer this, maybe it's a very quick webinar. Is there really a teacher shortage question? I looked at the data, or at least one source of data. It said we basically have the same number of teachers the last 2 years as we have the years before that. We're around 51 to 50,000. So, all right, is this real? Is there a real shortage? What's actually going on? Dr. Brumley, why don't you kick us off?
Sure, thank you, and thank you for having me. It's great to be on with Dr. Calderon and Ms. Posey here for the event today. Look, I can't answer the question without first just sharing what a noble profession teaching actually is, and the fact that over the last couple of years, our teachers and leaders across the state of Louisiana have been nothing short of heroes for the work that they have accomplished. And I would put their work up against anything in the country. And I tell my colleagues throughout the country that quite frequently. But to answer your question, I think we have bodies, we have people in the classrooms. The question becomes more so around the shortage that we may have in terms of certification or quality, people working towards quality and or certification. The State Department of Louisiana education has never really tracked the number of vacancies that exist across the state of Louisiana. And we did that for the first time to the best of our ability during essentially the turn of this calendar year. We asked the 191 LEAs across the state to give us their certificated vacancies at the present time. That was December, January timeframe. So mid-year. And at that point, we received about a 74% response rate from systems throughout the state. So that gave us good information. And what we did to receive the other 26%, we made estimates using similar school systems to try and form an estimate on it, what it would look like at 100%. And through that, we believe that we have about 2,520 certificated vacancies throughout the state of Louisiana as of that moment in time. If you do just simple math, I've shared this a few times, and say that each one of those positions would impact 20 kids, just at a minimum, you're looking at about 50,000 kids that are impacted every single day. So certainly I do believe that we have work to do in order to make sure that every kid has access to a high quality teacher. And I know that the other panelists on this call likewise believe that and are looking, as I am, for solutions to help make that possible.
So then let me follow up with Cynthia and Paula. Is that basically right? It's not so much a warm bodies, we don't have enough people issue, it's that we don't have enough qualified people issue. Is that a correct characterization?
I would agree. And Steve, thanks for having us all today. What we're finding from our partner districts, Southeastern partners with 9 school districts, and what we're finding is that bodies are there, like Dr. Brumley said, and if they're certified teachers, they may be teaching in an area where they're not certified. Otherwise, they're uncertified teachers, long-term subs, and our school districts are asking for teachers, asking for our certified teachers. And even if Dr. Brumley mentioned the number of students, if a classroom is not filled with a warm body or a certified teacher, either one, then those students are divided and put in other classrooms. And so now instead of a class of 20, maybe it's a class of 30. And that also impacts the students, and it impacts the teacher, and it impacts that student-teacher ratio.
Stephen, I know you want to jump to Cynthia right here.
Oh, no,
but one point that Dr. Calderon mentioned, it probably feels more so like there is a shortage because of the absentees of teachers over the last couple of years because of sickness and or quarantines. So when those things happen and there's not a bank of substitutes to be able to come in, because likewise, we don't have enough substitute teachers across the state, then you have those students divided up into other places. And it feels more, because it is a pressure point for teachers that remain on the campus.
Great. Cynthia?
So I would say yes, there's definitely a teacher shortage. Dr. Brumley mentioned certified vacancies. Well, there are a lot of other vacancies as well as the uncertified teachers. And then also you have long-term subs, which they are literally hired to teach the whole year. I think really the people you need to ask are the teachers in the classroom, and that's the people that we represent. And we hear from all over the state that they are struggling. If they have a break, they're asked to teach on their break to fill in for a teacher that's not there. As our president pointed out at Bessie this last meeting, we have janitors that are filling in classrooms. So without a doubt, there is a teacher shortage, yes, and it's having an effect on the morale of our teachers, and also I think mainly on our children. We really need to look at it because it is affecting our students.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure we understood and just understood what we're talking about when we're talking about a teacher shortage and what we're looking at. With that, we can start talking about all of the various ways we have a shortage on the pipeline or on the retention issues and all the different potential we can fix it. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Melinda so she can start asking some of those questions that get at some of those issues.
Hello, everyone. And I just want to let the people who are watching know, if you want to ask a question, feel free to drop it in the chat, and I'm happy to ask those questions of the panel. But let's start with this. The education department has some great data, and we kind of went through a lot of it ourselves, just looking at like the information that was available about this issue. And what I found is that more than 1 in 10 teachers leaves the classroom each year. And then you also have the issue of the pipeline of new teachers that is significantly decreasing. So I guess what I'd like to start with is, which problem is more pressing to address? Is it teacher retention of the teachers who are already in the classroom, or is it the pipeline problem of getting new teachers into classrooms? And I guess on this one, I'll just start with Cynthia, since she went last on the last one.
That's a great question. Thank you, Melinda. And the department has put out some great information about that. What I would say is that if you do not address teacher retention before you address the pipeline into education, into being a teacher, no matter how many you get to come in, it's like filling a bucket with no bottom. And I think that if you look at their data that says that over half of teachers leave within the first 10 years, that shows that. And then I think the even more concerning part of that is that over half the teachers of those that leave are rated effective or highly effective. So I really think that we need to listen to our teachers. They have been telling us for years what's wrong. We really need to pay attention to the teachers and listen to them so that we can fix this problem.
Right. Cade, if you would like to jump in next on that one, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both. I think the most important thing that we should do is have conversation with teachers. And the issue is not just the conversation, but if teachers are not willing to tell their students or the children of their friends that those individuals should consider a career in education, then we have a problem. I was recently at an event where you had about 300 high school seniors from across the country in a room, and they were at college, and the leader of the event asked those students, why are you considering coming to this college? Do you want to be an accountant? Do you want to be a nurse? Do you want to be an attorney? Hands would go up each and every time. Whenever the individual asked, how many of you, probably 300 high school seniors, are here because you want to be a teacher, not a single hand in the entire room was raised. That's an issue. And so I agree with Cynthia here that we need to have additional conversations with teachers and understand more about the reasons why they are not recruiting their own students to come into the profession. So I think that is important. But look, I also think that there are things that we need to do in terms of education pathways. We are creating pathway programs where students can earn dual enrollment in their high schools. I believe we're up this year to 50 programs and 50 different systems rather. We're thinking about how we can be more deliberate in moving them in a way from their high school to the colleges in teacher education. We have legislative work around that this particular year. And also another area I think that we have to look into would be individuals who are in other careers that might have an interest in coming into the profession, and how can we make that attempt more seamless so that it is a seamless attempt for them to be able to come into the profession, and then on the other end receive mentoring and coaching and the resources that they would need to be successful when they're here. So there are many different areas around this. I don't think we can say, oh, it's just returning retirees to work, or it's just pre-educator programs, or it's just alternative programs, or it's just this or that. I think there are many different components around this to make sure that we have the workforce that we need.
Paula, would you like to jump in on this one, please?
Sure. Cynthia mentioned that retention is crucial even before we start recruiting, and Cade mentioned teachers recruiting their own students. That plays into what we see coming into the university. If our highly effective teachers are leaving, and then students find out that the reasons they're leaving are for whatever it might be, no support, too much of something, and if those reasons are negative, then the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders are thinking, yeah, Miss So-and-so was a great teacher and she left. I don't want to be a teacher. The reason I became a teacher was because of my high school French teacher. I became a high school French teacher. She got a doctoral degree. I got a doctoral degree, all because of that. Those are the types of teachers we need. If we can change what the 10th and 11th and 12th graders hear and see in their high schools, I think they will change their minds and become teachers. Before I sat down in front of the camera, I was at a recruiting event, and it was just for the students I spoke to were just education students. And someone stopped me, a parent stopped me and said, my husband is president of the school board, and in my district, we want Southeastern's graduates. And she was there with her child who is planning on studying education at Southeastern. So at that district, something good is going on. And those students want to come. The teachers want our students. There's another factor there, and it's if the retention rate also includes uncertified teachers or fast track certified. For instance, let's say I start teaching in Tangipahoa Parish as an uncertified teacher, and I've been there 3-4 years, and then I go through a fast track program, like a school-based certification program. I haven't gotten the support that I need in a fast track program, and my experience has been as an uncertified teacher. If we can get students into the universities to have an extended program, 120 credit hours, 4 years in the schools prior to ever stepping in for a job. I mean, just think about all of those experiences, 6 to 8 semesters in the schools before they ever become hired. That's a lot of experience, a lot of support, and a lot of confidence, where these students can become teachers right at the age of 22. So there's a lot of factors there, and it's really a multifaceted question.
But let me ask one question. When you say time in the schools, you mean the schools they'd be teaching at, not the School of Education at Southeastern?
No, you're correct. Not
Okay.
not as a paid teacher, and not in the College of Education. When they enter their senior college in the sophomore year, we put them out in field experiences
Right.
in the pre-K through 12 schools.
Great. Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Okay, as a reminder, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll keep going with mine for a little while. So the Department of Education's data shows that about 44% of the departing teachers from 2016 through 2019 left within the first 5 years. That was a striking statistic to me. I guess I just didn't realize the full scale of how quickly people leave. And so I would like to hear from y'all about what you think the mechanism is for best addressing that. Is it a pay raise? Is it changes, to the teacher evaluation program? I know we've heard that from teachers. Is it about the conduct of students in the classroom? Is it the pandemic that's causing people? I mean, this is pre-pandemic data, so obviously that can't be what's driving this issue. So how do you address that? So many, nearly half of teachers are leaving in the first 5 years. And I don't know who wants to start with that one. I'm going to assign somebody. Cade, if you don't mind going first on that one.
Well, it's not just that over 40% leave in the first 5 years. It's within the first 10 years, 60% leave. So once a teacher gets to the 10-year mark, they're more likely to stay, because 60% leave within the first 10 years. So I think it goes back to all of the things that you just listed. So I would say yes to those things. But I would also offer that I think the workforce is shifting. I think people are more fluid in their jobs today than they were 50 years ago. I think we need opportunities for people to come into the profession for short term and know that they're going to leave. 40, 50 years ago, a teacher would begin their career. They would teach for 30 years. They would have a home beside the school. They would be in a retirement system, for instance, and And that's the way it was until they decided to go home. Today, you're seeing a much more fluid workforce. So you need opportunities, and there are organizations that do this work where people can come in even for a short term. Yes, we absolutely want the people that want to be here for a long term, but we have to recognize that today's workforce is much more fluid in the amount of times that individuals will change jobs than it was decades ago.
Okay. Cynthia, I'm assuming you probably have some thoughts on what could be done to keep people longer than the 5 to 10 year mark.
Well, I do. First of all, I think in relation to what Dr. Brumley said is, I don't think that assumption necessarily applies to teachers, because teachers, as a rule of thumb, go into the profession because this is what they want to do. They have a calling to do, to teach. So I think that, and I think that the data shows, that prior to a lot of things that we've done to our education system, teachers were staying in because this is what they wanted to do. LSU did a study in 21 where they did a survey of pre-K through 12th grade of the teachers. And they said that workload, support, evaluation, resources, respect for the profession, a disconnect between the views of teachers and administrators, lack of support, rigid curriculum. They were unable to actually teach the children and invest and address their individual needs. And then 60% disagreed strongly that the accountability system is fair. And we've seen other states take steps to correct all of this. Louisiana hasn't. And that's something we really need to look at. And one other thing I will say, I know that I saw a poll recently, a national poll, and it wasn't so much that the teachers were saying not to go into education, which they are, because they care about their students, but it was really the parents. And I can say personally, even back in the 80s when I started LSU, my mother, who was a career teacher, was very blunt. If you go into education, I will not help you. So I think this is something that we really need to address.
Has the pandemic worsened this problem of people leaving the profession or attracting or discouraging people from entering it? I mean, has that made this situation even worse than it already was?
I think that, yes, it has to a certain extent. I know that our organization, I'm very blessed to be able to talk with a lot of teachers that are in the classroom and interact with them. And they felt to a large extent that their concerns were not being listened to about how safe the environment was. Louisiana, we were in school except for that one spring semester, but the following year we came back and we as a state remained in school. But there were a lot of concerns over safety. And I think that just added on to what teachers, the frustration and what they were already feeling.
Melinda, I would offer there, though, like everything that you mentioned initially, I would say yes to. When you're talking about the classroom environment, feeling that they're valued professionals, not being attacked on social media, having a leader that's acceptable to them, like having support systems in place, all those things matter. Yes, I agree. And we have to make sure all of those things are in place. But it was not just the education profession that was impacted during the pandemic.
Right.
I mean, how many people changed jobs during the course of the pandemic? Many. And in fact, if you look at this term called the Great Resignation, more individuals changed jobs during this period of time than has happened maybe ever. And so people were looking for different options, not just in education, but across all sectors.
Well, but I think this began, the leaving of the teaching profession began prior to the pandemic. And I think the pandemic exacerbated a lot of it.
Yeah, I agree. That's fair. Yep.
Melinda, I would say our teachers did a phenomenal job during the pandemic. If you look at how we're doing this webinar right now, If a teacher has students on screen and then in the back, in person, it's very hard to teach. But what teachers did during the pandemic was they planned multiple ways and multiple lessons for the same class. So instead of planning to teach English or third grade, they learned how to teach their third grade class remotely with students in person, and then with those students who maybe did not have connectivity but had to still complete the assignments at home somehow. And so they were planning 3 different ways for one class, where pre-pandemic, those teachers only had to do one plan for that third grade. So they absolutely did a phenomenal job. And Cade mentioned being bashed on social media, which we know that that's a problem. But what I did notice on social media were the parents who said our teachers need to be paid $1 million a day because of what they were doing to continue instruction during the pandemic. Melinda, you and Cindy both mentioned the accountability system. Our accountability system is punitive rather than supportive. And that is something that I hope will change for our teachers and for our colleges of teacher education, because I think we can do a lot better with holding teachers accountable, but also providing those support systems in addition to accountability.
We're starting to get some questions in from folks who are watching. One of them was, what effective strategies have come out of the federal COVID funds to address the teacher shortage? And as these funds become exhausted, what lessons can state and local lawmakers draw from those strategies to create better fiscal policies for K-12 education? That might be a Cade question.
Well, one of the things that systems are doing in varying amounts and in various locations is that they are offering additional pay to their teachers, stipends over the last couple of years. I know also, like for after school and summer programming, many systems have increased the rates of pay for those types of opportunities, which I think all of that is good. Whenever we think about the future, when we're talking about pay, like teachers deserve to be compensated well. They deserve to be compensated like they should be as a professional. I think everyone realized, I certainly did as a dad, and having my kids home for a period of time, like they need to get back to school as quickly as possible. And this is hard at home. So I saw a comment in the chat just around compensating teachers, and I certainly agree that has to happen. One of the misconceptions I hear sometimes, though, is that is completely a state level responsibility, when in fact teachers are the employees of their local political subdivision, whether that's a local charter school or whether that's their traditional school district. So there has to be a combination here between state responsibility and local system responsibility to elevate teacher pay.
And I understand in terms of teacher pay, that's something that some of these districts have used the billions of dollars in federal funding for, but obviously that's a short-term resource. So are there ways to use that assistance to help address training programs, any number of things, because obviously that money's going to run dry. So if you're using that to raise teacher pay, that seems very temporary to me.
Well, it is, but the rationale for those dollars to begin with is COVID response and to support students and their teachers through this particular pandemic. And so that's the intent of those dollars. But all of those dollars have to be expended by September of 2024. So that money will no longer be there beyond that point. And that's why it's important that whether it's legislative action, which is being considered this year, or whether it's within local systems, scrubbing budgets as much as possible, realizing that there's nothing more important to a kid than have a high quality teacher in the classroom. Pay has to be elevated.
Okay. I want to get to some of these questions in the chat, so I'm just going to look through some of them right now. And there's a couple questions that are thematically the same about suggesting that teachers aren't viewed by legislators as professionals, or that they're used as sort of political footballs in legislative sessions. And the question seems to be about why does that happen, and why aren't teachers treated better and less used as sort of a political stalking horse in the legislative conversation. So I guess I would like to know if y'all view that the same way, if you agree with the premise of that suggestion, and if you have any thoughts about how that could be improved. Whichever one of you would like to start.
Well, I think that, Melinda, I can, again, because we work with teachers every day. And when you talk to them about what happens in the legislative session, they're almost dismissive, because, if you think about for the last decade, they, even when back in 2010, 2012, when we started with a lot of the reform measures, the doors to the Capitol were chained shut, so they had to go in the side doors. When they got to committee, they were put through a procedure that we've never seen before, where they had to say, if they were taking a personal day, a sick day, where they taught. And then teachers have tried over and over, we've helped facilitate that, to get their message out, to talk about what they're feeling. And it falls on deaf ears. And so they're almost to the point of, why would I keep doing this? It's easier to quit, to retire. And in fact, it was funny. We had one teacher who made a really great comparison. She said, during COVID, it was almost as if we were in a teenage situation where, this week they love us. They love us. We're great. We're heroes. Well, it's the attention span of an adolescent. A couple of months later, they're back again, not paying attention to us, and being very dismissive. So I think that's the frustration that the teachers feel.
Paula, do you see something similar?
I do. Our students, our teacher candidates, they're excited to go into the field. They're ready to go. And I'll tell you this, back when I was student teaching way too many years ago, I sat down in the teacher's lounge, and someone looked at me 3 months away from graduation and said, "So have you changed your major yet?" No, I was excited to go into teaching. And that was a long time ago. And so now fast forward to fast forward to what Cynthia just said about comments and concerns falling on deaf ears. It's disheartening. Certain bills that come out are also disheartening, whether they pass or not. Just the mere mention or the mere accusation of a teacher not being a professional. Our teachers have bachelor's, master's, specialist, plus 30, and doctoral degrees. They're definitely professionals, but I don't know why they're not viewed that way. Here are a couple of things. Everybody's gone to school, therefore everybody knows how to teach or what it means to be a teacher. Guess what? I've had 8 operations in my life, but you don't want me operating on you. I can turn the light switch on and off, but do you want me rewiring your house? This is where this is where people just don't think, yeah, I'm going to leave it to the professionals, meaning the teachers. Leave that to the teachers. The nursing board is made up of nurses, and they govern what goes on in nursing schools and nurses. The medical board, state medical boards, are made up of doctors, but educators are not evaluated and governed all the time by educators. It's mostly politicians. And I think that is a little bit of a problem and a disconnect in education, that in order to be seen as a profession, then let's be compared to other professionals. Engineering boards are made up of engineers.
Cade, let me ask you, there was a question in the chat that sort of dovetails with this about teacher retention and whether the data indicates that after those reform efforts were passed in 2012, if we started seeing as a state any changes in our retention levels, if that complicated efforts to keep teachers or somehow worsened the teacher exits.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to go back and look at, TRSL exits or something like that during specific years. I do know what the TRSL exits look like as a result of the pandemic, and can speak to that. And so we know that we have more exits from the profession over the last year than we would like to see, or from the previous years, really probably based on the pandemic. So I'd rather just speak to what I know for sure, as opposed to making some assumptions around things that may have happened a decade ago.
Cynthia, I don't know if there's anything anecdotal about that, or if you have any data that y'all have tracked since 2012, if that is somehow, if the legislation that was passed then and the accountability changes and all those things that happened in 2012, if that affected teacher exits in any way.
It did. And, I think just looking to only the TRSL data doesn't give an accurate picture, because those are people who retired. We also need to account for the people who just left. And there was a lot of them that did that, a lot of good teachers. So I think that, without a doubt, we've seen that. And then now with this new wave with COVID, it's just exacerbated that. And I think that we ought to do what some other states have done and really look at what we're putting our teachers through. Is it effective? If you look at testing, teachers get the results from the testing back, the children are already gone. And so it doesn't inform their instruction, yet we're spending all this money on it. So if we're looking for money to make sure that teacher pay raises are sustainable, I think we need to look at where we're putting our money and what we're getting for our money, and maybe look at spending that money elsewhere.
And Melinda, in 2012, teacher preparation took a nosedive in enrollment. And just to kind of put it in the time frame, so we've got the practicing teachers who are leaving, and then teacher preparation enrollment. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but the numbers dropped significantly in the state of Louisiana from 2012 on, and we're all struggling to get those numbers back.
I want to jump in just a little bit because I want to talk a little bit more about solutions. I know we talked about teacher pay raise, which would, I'm gonna make that analogy, that's like a home run. But in baseball, you also want to have small ball. So what are some sort of small things we can do? I know, Paula, we talked a little about like forgivable loan programs. I know there's retirement bills that would change, the return to work policies, retirement, or an overall change in retirement policy. What are the other small things that maybe, pay raises cost $100 million? What are little chunks that we can get done in the $10, $20 million range that might be useful? Not saying that would be in place of, but what else can we do just in the remaining time that we have?
Steve, I think I may have mentioned this to you on the phone. When I was an undergrad in Louisiana, I received a scholarship from the Louisiana Department of Education for X number of semesters, 4 semesters. And all I had to do was teach in a Louisiana school, public, private, magnet, it did not matter, for 4 years for those 4 semesters. And I didn't have to pay the loan back. And also graduate degrees for practicing teachers were paid for by the State Department. Now I realize money was different and money has changed, but there may be districts that have money who can encourage their teacher candidates, or encourage their students rather, to become teacher candidates and enroll in colleges of education, and then return to that home district and teach for X number of years, and then that loan is paid for in service. And I think that is an effective way to go, is a loan, a service payback for a loan.
I can suggest one thing, and I think is what we hear the most, is teacher workload. There are so many things that they're already being asked to do. And things are just added to their plate. I know that planning time is an issue. They have no planning time. And I know that one thing I've been hearing a lot in the last year is the NIET, and where they have to take 90 minutes a week of their planning time to come together to, and its intent is for them to collaborate. But while that may be the intent at the high level, what's actually happening in the schools is something else. I know that in one school, the teachers were required to have a book study on a book that didn't have anything to do with their. So I think that we really need to look hard at what we're asking of our teachers and question, is this helping them, and listen to them. One thing, we've seen that where we're putting teachers on a lot of our, like the discipline task force, things like that. Well, and we're asked to have someone come and participate. Well, what they come back with is that, they don't listen to what we have to say. Why do I have to take the time out of my classroom where I need to be when they don't even want to hear what I have to say? And so again, I think that the listening to the teachers and the teacher voice is just so important. I can't emphasize that enough.
Dr. Brumley?
Well, if you want to talk policy, one of the policy decisions that is taking place in the legislature right now is the Go Teach Fund. So our idea behind that is we are developing educator pathway programs throughout the state in high schools where students can earn dual enrollment. And the Go Teach Fund, if it could be established and receive an allocation, it would provide scholarship opportunities, much like Dr. Calderon mentioned, so that we could take individuals who are in our high schools who want to be teachers and offer them some level of scholarship in addition to TOPS, so that they could go to college and go into our colleges of education. So that is something that is a policy decision that is working its way through the legislature right now, which I think is one of the pieces of the puzzle. Going back to pay, though, when I had the opportunity to serve as superintendent in Jefferson Parish, we passed the first pay raise for teachers in a decade. And a similar attempt for a teacher pay raise had failed a couple of years before we had tried that. And so we knew that we had to find a way to get the entire community around a pay raise. And so we built a model that elevated base pay by a couple $1,000s for every teacher in the system, but also offered targeted supports for teachers who wanted to work in high need schools or had certifications that the market said were more in demand, teachers who wanted to take on leadership opportunities. Not every teacher wants to be a principal, but some want additional leadership opportunities. And so we built all those additional stipends into that formula, and it passed with 74%. And people said you would never pass a tax in Jefferson Parish, but we built one that most people could get around and support. And that was the efforts of business community and unions and everyone working together. And I really felt like it was a model for other places to think about how they compensate teachers in the 21st century.
I want to point out real quickly, Nancy Harrelson in the chat put the task force from the Teacher Recruitment and Retention Task Force is excellent report. I would encourage everyone to sort of click on that or go to the website and find it. There's a lot of information there, a lot of facts, as well as a lot of suggested policies. It is still, I believe it's still preliminary at this point, but I don't know that a lot is going to change. That's a great resource. Thank you for putting that in the chat. Is any last comments for anyone? Because I want to be respectful of everyone's time, because I told everyone we would end at 1. Any last closing comments from any of our panelists?
I would just like to thank you for having me on and to have a great conversation with Paula and with Cade. Again, we're all very passionate about what we do and about education and teachers, students. I'd be remiss if I didn't just say one last time, I think the retention is the key, because we can, again, pour all the water we want to into that bucket. But if there's no bottom to the bucket, we're not going to solve this problem. But Stephen, thank you for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. Dr. Brumley, Dr. Calderon.
Well, I know people have to go, but I would just offer that teachers are more than an instrument. Teachers are a valuable professional in our communities, and our kids deserve high quality teachers because our kid outcomes in Louisiana are long challenged. And that's what we need to be solving for first and foremost. And one of the ways we solve for that is through conversations like this to ensure we have high quality teachers for every kid.
Thank you. Dr. Calderon?
Steve, thanks for having us. This has been a pleasure and informative. Always happy to be with these two brilliant folks. And we rest assured we meaning all collective 20 university teacher preparation programs, public and private, are doing our best to make sure that we recruit teachers. They are very well prepared to go into today's classrooms. And we are out there beating the bushes and recruiting, and hope that we can make some positive changes very soon.
Thank y'all so much. I want to thank everyone. I think the panelist was great. I think y'all were a model of civil behavior. A lot of different people with different backgrounds. And it's great to see people, again, maybe disagreements on policies, really to be able to talk to them in a very professional manner. I think it's wonderful. And that's what we're trying to do here with these PAR webinars. I also want to thank our sponsor, ExxonMobil. Hopefully their support allows us to keep doing these type of things, which are hopefully educational and informative. I do want to point out, because the PAR is going to have our annual conference on April 28th. That's coming up. It's going to be focused on Louisiana's energy revolution. So we're looking at the changing face of how energy is happening, not just solar and wind, but what is carbon sequestration? What the heck is that about? I'm going to find out myself. You can find more on our website if you're interested in that. This, remember, is recorded. We're going to put this on YouTube for people that missed it. I know there's a lot of probably educators that weren't able to follow, so please send it to them. We're going to send it out on our social media. I want to thank everyone sincerely again for your participation. I want to thank everyone that joined us. This is a very short time. We went a little over time. We weren't able to get all the questions. Maybe we'll revisit this again in the fall, because I think this is a very important topic. Maybe we'll narrow it down to just recruitment or retention because it's such a big issue. Thank y'all very much. And I want to thank everyone. Have a great weekend.